So today we are going to be talking about skid plates, vehicle underbody protection, stuff like that. This little unassuming feature right here makes this skid plate one of the best on the market, in my opinion. That's what we're going to talk about today. Mostly we're going to talk about this feature, but we're also going to talk about other aspects of the skid plate and why I think these are the best on the market. Real quick, this little feature improves pretty much every dynamic aspect of your vehicle, and it also adds a lot of value to these skid plates. So let's get into why. Welcome to Jay Designs. My name is Tyler. Just kidding, it's Jay. But let's get into it. By the way, ARB skid plates, I'm not sponsored. I purchased this full skid plate set with my own money. In order to talk about why these skid plates are better than anything else on the market, we need to talk about other people's skid plates. So real quickly, other people's skid plates are made out of 3/16 steel, whereas this is made out of 1/8" steel. So how is thinner steel better than thicker steel? It's this feature right here. This is essentially how they make up for that thickness. So what's the job of a skid plate? Let's talk about that really quick. So these will be bolted to the underside of your vehicle. So your vehicle will be on top of these skid plates. These are going to come up from the bottom. And what's the job of these guys, right? So we've got rocks, stuff like that, kind of come up from the underside of your vehicle, and you want to protect your oil pan and your transmission pan and whatever. So the skid plate is designed to stop that. And how the skid plates stop that is they have to resist all the bending loads. So if this is, bolted on this end and bolted on this end, and there's a rock trying to come up right here, this is designed to not bend. And that's essentially what these features right here do. These features add bending resistance to the skid plate. And it's pretty impressive. But how do they do that? They add thickness in the direction of loading. Direction of loading is this way again. You see this feature right here adds thickness in the direction of loading. Talking about bending here, these are the instructions, by the way. These are ARB instructions. It's another reason why the skid plate's a good buy, is it comes with really, really good instructions. But that's not what we're talking about here. What I want to talk about is bending. So this is what's called a cantilevered position. All that essentially means there's support on one side, no support on the other. Weight's pushing down right about here, right? That's the center of mass of the paper we're pushing down right there. So tell me how the paper can be held up like this, but if you turn it sideways, the paper falls down. Do that again there. Falls down versus being able to stay up. How does it do that, right? It's material in the direction of loading. We'll talk about bending a lot on this channel, but yeah. See how the thickness in this direction is? There's approximately 6 inches right there of thickness, versus this way, it's quite literally paper thin. So material in the direction of loading is what you want. Now, there are other ways than this feature right here to achieve bending resistance. One of the ways of doing it is adding a big structural member like this. But there's some downsides to doing this, right? This right here adds a tremendous amount of material. Like, look at all that goes across. We have to pay for this material in multiple ways. We have to pay for it in cost. We pay for it in weight, which is, if you're paying for it in weight, you're essentially paying for it in performance of your vehicle. So it's not really ideal to add a ton of material like this. The other way of adding resistance to bending is changing the thickness of the material. So that's what I was talking about earlier. Almost every other manufacturer of skid plate systems like to do 3/16 material, whereas this is just 1/8 of an inch thick. Again, that goes back to, you got to pay for more material, and you got to pay for that in the performance of your vehicle. There's also the reliability aspect. Nobody ever thinks about that. If you're adding a ton of weight to your vehicle, you're just going to wear out components a whole heck of a lot faster. It'll be more likely to break. But anyways, so why this is so impressive is this doesn't add any material whatsoever. So how these features right here are essentially made is it's sitting in a big old press. The material comes in, and there's a negative die and a positive die like that, and they come together and go ka-chunk. It's 1/8" material when it comes in. It stamps this little feature into it, and it's 1/8" material when it comes back out. You're not adding any extra material. You don't have to pay for additional material in here. If you have to pay for additional material, you have to pay for somebody to put that material in, to weld it in, essentially. So that's how this stuff adds value, and it reduces the bending. Like, it's just such an impressive feature. And that's really one of the benefits to going with a big company like ARB, is that they just have access to these really high-end manufacturing methods that really reduce the cost of the product while still providing good resistance to bending, or essentially good protection to the underside of your vehicle. You can see all these numbers I've written on the skid plates. I've actually went through and weighed all of them. I wrote that on there. So to me, the weightness is pretty important of these skid plates because it's actually knocking on the door of the weight of some aluminum skid plates. And steel just has different material properties from that of aluminum. Steel is a substantially harder material, and it's also not as springy as aluminum. Aluminum likes to kind of like deflect, bend back. And the softness of aluminum is also an issue. I have a bit of a experience with aluminum on my own truck. I'll show you real quick. So I've actually done aluminum sliders, and these deserve their own video. But when rocks hit aluminum, man, it just freaking digs in. Hopefully that's popping up on camera. So in my opinion, steel skid plates are the way to go, just due to that hardness and resistance to deflecting. But I will in the future do a video on those aluminum rock sliders, because I think they do have an application in overlanding and stuff like that. Honestly, everyone told me not to do aluminum sliders. I built those myself, but I'm fairly impressed by them actually. So I need to do a video on those. See, the thing is, this truck already has bad acceleration. It's already got bad braking performance, so I don't want to go adding a ton of excessive weight to that vehicle, making that already bad acceleration, already bad braking performance even worse. And the cool thing is this skid plate system really helps with that. I don't know if I like this. I don't know what that is, what it's there for, but we're on every single skid plate. That's adding weight, man. I'm just on little tack welds. I might go knock those off. Main things I wanted to talk about, that's it right there. This is a hella impressive feature that I don't think I see anybody talk about. It's also one of the reasons why I love engineering. You go and you just do one simple little feature like this, and there's a whole myriad of benefits that come from this. So again, I want to cover it one more time just to drive the point home. This makes the entire skid system lighter. So 1/8 inch between 3/16 of an inch, that's 50% thinner. This skid plate system is 50% thinner than a 3/16. So that means essentially a 50% weight reduction with the same resistance to bending, I would argue. That's pretty impressive to me. I am someone who likes, kind of performance driving, so lightweight to me is very important. But obviously, we want to go off-road, we want to go crawl on the rocks and stuff like that, so underbody protection is still very important, still top priority. Other things that this feature does is it reduces costs. So we're paying, again, it's 50% thinner material, so we essentially have 50% less cost because we're buying 50% less volume of material. And that reduction in cost is twofold actually, because yeah, you don't have to pay for another rib to be put in here, and that doesn't have to be welded in. You have to pay somebody to do that, or you have a machine do it or whatever. And then on top of that, you're buying 50% less material. Like it's pretty impressive, man. Such a little tiny thing. I don't know, kind of blown away by it, but kind of lost for words. I'm just so giddy about it. Anyways, this is why I love engineering. Let's get to some of the other features of these skid plates. Other things I like about these. So another thing I really like about this skid plate system is the coating that's on it. I don't have definite proof that these are galvanized, but I would bet that they are. I have other friends who, I do not have an ARB bumper on my truck, but I have 2 friends that I know that have ARB bull bars on the front of their vehicles. They've had them on there for years, and those bumpers look as good as they were new, and that's because they are galvanized. So if you don't know what galvanizing is, it is a coating process that, in my opinion, should absolutely be done to steel. Most companies that make bumpers do not. So not sponsored by Rust-Oleum either, but you can buy galvanic compound in the can here. But essentially what galvanizing does is it pretty much just stops rust dead in its tracks. When you see parts that aren't galvanized, you can tell the difference if you know what you're looking for. The rust, essentially if you get a chip in a piece of steel that's not galvanized, a chip in the paint, the rust will essentially run underneath the paint from that chip. As soon as there's one chink in the armor, the whole thing that's made out of steel is done, unless it's galvanized. Look at the color difference in this. This is the color of your galvanizing compound versus the skid plates. Like, they are literally the color of galvanizing, and you can paint over this. Most companies do what's called an e-coat. So e-coats have like a galvanizing compound in them. Usually e-coats have different colors as well. So big OEMs, stuff like that, they galvanize their chassis, and that's how they mitigate rust. Let me show you something else. So here's the difference between galvanizing and just painting something. You can even primer, whatever. It needs to be galvanized. So this right here has been sitting outside. This is a dip bar I made forever ago. It's also my painting rack, because that's why all these wires are hanging off these things. Anyways, this right here is a almost, I think, 3-year running experiment. I'm gonna do a video on these guys soon, but essentially what this was is I put a piece of painter tape here, and then this one was galvanized and this one was painted. And that's it. And you can see this is the galvanized one. Look at the rust. It's a clean break. There's no rust running past the area that was galvanized. I'll show you on the painted one in a second. Even around this hole where it's been rattling around on this wire, there's no rust up in that hole. You can see we may have missed the corner just a hair there, but it's pretty impressive. There's just a clean break line between where the steel's rusting and where the galvanizing completely stopped that rust in its tracks. In comparison to the part that was just painted, you see the rust forming in this hole here. There's rust running up the side underneath the paint, rust on top. And you can see this one, the line would be right about here, but you can see how much the rust has started to run underneath the paint. So that is why you galvanize, ladies and gentlemen. And I would submit, based on seeing other people's ARB bumpers, that those skid plates are galvanized too. A lot of companies out there, they will powder coat bumpers for you, but it is not galvanized. As soon as there's a chink in that powder coat or in that paint, the rust is running underneath it. In a year or two, that bumper is going to look like crap. So another feature about these things I really like, which is not, I guess, uncommon from other skid plate systems, but all of the bolts on this thing are like completely recessed. It's pretty impressive. They have this interesting like ramp plate design, and your bolt will come up through this feature right here. It would come up this way. So the bolt head is like hidden underneath the skid plate essentially, so it's all flat bellied all the way across. I've seen other companies where they'll put bolts on the bottom, but then they'll have like a bung, something like this, that would protect the bolt. This is the top side of the skid, but it would be on the bottom. So I think the skids being actually completely on the other side of the skid plate is better than having a little friggin' bung down there. So next we're gonna talk about a couple things I don't like about this skid plate. So you know I'm not friggin' lying to you, and you know, just trying to rep skid plates. Not sponsored at all. But really quickly, why I love these skid plates, this feature right here to me is something that's so impressive. That reduction in weight is very, very important to me, and I think it should be important to you too. The other thing, obviously, galvanic coating, we just talked about that, completely recessed bolts and amazing instructions. That is why I like these skid plates. So here is what I don't like about these skid plates. So this is one of the, I don't know, frame brackets we'll call. So this part will bolt up to the frame on both these parts, and it bolts up to the bottom of this skid plate. This is a very, so it bolts in right here. You see this little piece? So your other bolts here that goes to the frame, and the part that actually holds these skid plates up are way the frig over here. It's pretty wild. I think this is just gonna give. You see how thin this is? It's like 1/16 of an inch, maybe less. I don't know why ARB just didn't bypass this entirely. So I've built my own high clearance front end of the truck, which you'll see in a second. And I just bypassed this part entirely. So this part would just be eliminated, and I have a square tube that would just sit in between here and get the skid plate to the right, you know, depth. I don't know why ARB didn't do that too. But anyways, let's go get these skids on the truck. We're gonna bolt them up with these brackets. We're gonna see what happens. So here's what I do not like about these ARB skid plates. So first off, this is not a very factory front end. I know that. This is my high clearance front end, and it's ultralight, and it's a front hitch for a winch up here. Anyways, there would be, you can see the old rust marks if I chopped it off. Right here, there would be a cross member that came down and went all the way across here, and the front edge of this ARB skid plate would tie in to that cross member that's not here. But thankfully, that cross member is not here, so we can see in here about what I'm talking about. So here's these cheesy brackets I'm talking about. They go back there to that cross member here, and here's the ARB skid plates. So these things are super thin. They're like, I don't know, maybe 1/16 of an inch. And then they just bolt in to these little tiny mounts here, and that little piece is like cantilevered off of this little cheesy bracket. The part that bugs me is they have these cheesy brackets from Toyota, but right here there's a nice big beautiful bolt, and a couple inches behind there's another big beautiful bolt inside of this cross member. They could have went off of this. Like it wouldn't have been too hard to do a stanchion, you know, some kind of a stand, like just omitting this factory bracket here essentially and going straight to the solid frame there. It's weird that they didn't. Another thing too, I guess why it might be okay, and we're going to check in a second, is there's not a lot of clearance here between this brace that's on the ARB skid plate and the diff support right here. So I can only get like, or I can't even get a finger between there, And then right here is a factory jack point that I like using a lot. And the skid plate doesn't have a lot of movement before it would engage this. So maybe what they're relying on is these cheesy brackets. If they bend, it's going to engage this factory jack point, engage this diff brace. There's another diff brace on that side that it would engage and maybe would stop that upward movement, hopefully before it bends these cheesy brackets. But what we're going to do is I'm going to jack the truck up because I like using that center jack point there. The only reason that piece of metal is on the frame is it's a jack point, right? People see me use it in videos all the time and they freak out when they see me using this thing, but it is a factory jack point. Anyways, I like using it. So we're gonna jack up underneath the truck, get both wheels off the ground, and we're gonna see how much these little cheesy brackets bend. So sometimes you're right, sometimes you're completely wrong. Let me show you. So we got, this truck's leaning over on one side. It's like pivoting on the jack. That tire's almost off the ground. This one's completely off of the ground, supported by the middle of the jack. I can still, the gap closed up, so something must have moved, but I can still get a finger, or I can get something in between this diff mount and the skid plate. And these little brackets that I said were cheesy, I guess aren't all that cheesy. They're holding up to that force. They're definitely not buckling. I can get a finger between this diff mount and the skid plate as well. I think what's going on is the skid plate's contacting the factory jack point here. Like there was a gap on the back of this jack point and the skid plate, and now that's not there anymore. But dang, these things are pretty good. So I was actually underneath the truck, looking at all the bolt holes, dropping my factory skids, getting ready to install these skid plates when I found, holy crap, a big old rusted frame, a big old rusted hole in the frame of my truck. Yeah, pretty crappy. Yeah, if you want to see me, talking about how you can check your own frame for rust damage like this, make sure and check out this video here. And also at some point, I'll be doing a restoration video trying to correct the hole in the frame of my truck.